living in the now, being more present, living and mastering the moment. But let's face it, that's not an easy thing to do.
Don't criticize it. Don't judge it. Observe it. Just start to get familiar with those moments when you're not fully present.
It's stopping and listening versus moving and hearing, and being really intentional about that.
If you can approach it with a heart of gratitude, a mindset of gratitude, any task is easier to do. Hi, and welcome to the Living Richly podcast. So glad that you are here with us today. This is an exciting episode because we're going to be going back to the quadrant model, but not exactly the part that we've talked about in the past. We are kind of going into the quadrant within the quadrant within the quadrant. And we're going to be talking about mastering the moment.
Yeah.
Eric, this is some stuff that you've been kind of unpacking and building out as part of the Living Richly model. Maybe take a few minutes and just give us a little sense of where we're going today and how it fits into the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the original quadrant model that came out of our journey, my journey of transformation, that second great awakening that I referred to in spring of 2022, was what has become the foundations of the 15-day challenge, which is designing the life you've always dreamed of, which is actually, in the larger models, I continue to reflect on it and think about what it takes to live your best life and achieve your full potential. There was more to the story. And so that actually is part 3. That's quadrant number 3 of 4. And a few shows back, we talked about reclaiming your story,
right,
and how our relationship with our past and resetting that can be so important. That's kind of quadrant number 1. Quadrant number 2 is designing the life you've always dreamed of. Quadrant number 3, which we're looking at today, is something that we hear a lot about, which is living in the now, being more present, living and mastering the moment. But let's face it, that's not an easy thing to do. And we're going to approach the conversation today. It's a bit of an exploration because I'm curious to see what you guys think about it. These are kind of my thoughts and how I've approached it, but curious to see what you think. And we're going to be coming at it from 4 basic dimensions. Wholehearted presence. We're talking about deep engagement. We're going to talk about intentional choices, and then fostering connection. So let's jump in. And Kate, I'm going to throw this first question to you. The greatest gift we give other people is our full time and attention. In this day and age, for sure. I think it's one of the most valuable resources we can give someone. Yeah. When I say the phrase wholehearted presence versus divided attention, what does that stir up for you?
It's my whole life on plate. It's everything I battle with every single day. So I've done a lot of work. Get You Mindset's part of that to help me get present. So just to get aware of what I'm doing right now, be here. Don't be in the car on our way to Canadian Tire right now, right? So which is where we're going after. So like being here in the moment for me is really, really, really a work in progress. I will say that. As a mom, as a woman, we multitask all of the time. We are constantly thinking about the million things we have to do to keep the day organized, to keep everything moving. It's also what I do for a living. My role within Bold Lip and the business is I keep us organized. I keep all projects running. I keep everything running. So I am constantly in this flux of sort of doing 8 million things at once and also trying to balance be present. Like we've talked about this where when we're together, and we just talked about this on another show, if we are feeling like the other person's on their phone and they're not present, we've agreed that it's okay to say, hey, can you put your phone down? Yeah. Get You Mindset for me has helped me when I'm like washing the dishes and I'm thinking about everything else I have to do. I'm not saying you have to enjoy washing the dishes, but I get present to what the dishes mean. The dishes mean, I just had this amazing dinner with my kids and I'm so happy my kids are here. And so taking those moments to allow myself to get more present. But for me, it's this dichotomy that it's this dance that it's ever still flowing for me every day.
It's interesting. When I think of that notion of that total focus versus the divided attention. One of the things that comes to mind for me was actually at a conference that you and I were both doing some training at, and I talked talked in my presentation, part of the conversation was around active listening. And I took them through an exercise where one person was the teller and the other person was the hearer, and then they would have these conversations. And the goal was, one of the things they had to practice was not thinking about their response while the person was talking,
hard.
but being so focused in on what the person was saying and then asking follow-up clarifying questions. And they did this exercise for maybe 5 minutes. And I asked afterwards, so what was that experience like? The tellers, the people who were sharing the story said, I felt so heard. The askers made the statement, I felt so in the moment. Because I was so focused in that moment. So that's kind of how I'm thinking of those two, how they separate themselves.
But what a great example, because I think a lot of folks in conversation were listening for our next opportunity to say something, as opposed to truly being present to what they're saying.
Yeah. And it is about all that intentionality, right? It's stopping and listening versus moving and hearing, and being really intentional about that. And I don't think it's something that just you fix. I think to your point, Kate, it's a work in progress where sometimes you need to pull back and be like, okay, I'm hearing, but I'm not actually listening to what you're saying. And knowing what your triggers are and adjusting as you need to.
Yeah, definitely work in progress for me as well. I mean, I'm like a man on the move. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I love business. I love creating. I love pushing myself to new levels. And I think that's part of how I'm wired. But it can lead me to be elsewhere. When I'm in the moment, my mind is on something else. In the past, in former versions of myself, I think there was a lot of past stuff. It still shows up now, but less than before. But I think there's so many forces that are pulling us out of the moment, right? Either our past that's plaguing us or haunting us, or future stresses that may or may never show up, but we're anything but in the moment. And when we talk about mastering the moment, to me, it's not about doing it perfectly. Perfection's never the goal. But what if we could be more present, like 10% of the time, 15% of the time, 20% of the time? How would that change our reality, and how would it change the reality of the people around us? Right. Can you guys share an example of when divided attention impacted your life negatively, and how did that feel?
It's like all the time for me. Like for me, it just shows up when I'm trying to do way too many things at once. It's when I overcommit and I'm not really delivering on anything well. It's that moment where I'm like, I'm not doing anything well. So
spread too thin almost. Yeah.
I think in COVID for me, I remember talking to other moms who had kids at home and who were single parenting, and you've got 3 kids and they're all in online classes in different rooms and need different things. And I'm trying to work and I'm trying to help my mom and I'm like, I just don't feel like I'm doing anything well. And it's that feeling for me is when I'm like, so we talk about mastering none. I'm mastering in that moment, feeling awful. And it's not because I could have been doing anything better, but sometimes for me, I always use that example. It's when I overcommit and I spread myself too thin, I feel exactly like I did when I was in COVID. It's kind of my mark.
And so many leaders talked to us during that time when we were helping them navigate that season. And so many leaders told me, and I'm sure that told you the same, that they felt exactly that way. They felt like they weren't really succeeding at work because of this new dynamic, and they weren't really succeeding at parenting and schooling their kids, right? I think that was a real mind fuck, I think, for a lot right?
And I think it ties a lot into guilt as well. I do remember a very specific example when I was working in the HR space. Go, do, hustle. And I was at my daughter's baseball game, and I was she was up to bat, and of course, I'm sitting back, so she can't see me, but I'm responding literally on my phone to an HR question, and I missed her hit. And she came back. She's like, Mom, you missed my hit. And I was like, no, I saw it. And she's like, no, you were on your phone. So not only did I feel like shit for missing it, I also lied about it and felt even worse. And the look on her face, and I felt so guilty for not being in the moment for what? Like responding to nothing, right?
It's interesting because you use the language of multitasking earlier, and of course there's been lots written about the myth of multitasking, right?
Now, doesn't actually work.
I'm not fully convinced that it's a myth, because I do think we are actually capable of multitasking. For example, you can drive a vehicle and have a conversation at the same time. A lot of it goes to autopilot, right? Our brains are the most sophisticated computer. But the argument that against multitasking people use is computers. That computers don't actually multitask; they just do singular tasks incredibly fast, right, in microseconds. But we do know is that when we attempt to multitask, and I know this is true for me, where it becomes an issue, is you don't do anything well.
Right.
That notion of, and then you do feel stressed, because when you are multitasking, the time it takes for you to go back from one task to the next, I forget what the stats are or what it is, but it's like 15 minutes or something like that for you to fully get back engaged in what you were doing when you stop doing it, let's say to check email and then go back. So I think there's so many ways and so many examples of where it doesn't serve us well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's just times when multitasking for me is it's actual survival. Like I'm brushing my teeth and I remember, shit, I forgot to sign my daughter up for whatever, volleyball in the summer. And I keep forgetting. And so I'll brush my teeth and type in my phone because I'm going to forget. And sometimes it's just like, it's just the way my brain is ping ponging. And if I don't capture what I just hit, it's gone. And then I'll forget again. And then, so sometimes for me, it's that too. Yeah.
It's often been, we've heard the term mindfulness. We use it for the Mindfulness Masculinity series. Mindfulness is often talked about as being in the moment, living in the moment, focusing on what you're doing while you're doing it. And I remember saying on one of our earliest episodes, I think we weren't even in double digits yet. And I said, I've been mindful my whole life. I had a mind full of anxiety and stress. And, right. I was focused on all the wrong things. Yeah. And we all have multiple things pulling at us to take our eye off the prize and to obsess over. But again, what if we could reduce the noise, turn down the noise on that just a little, and turn up more of the noise to show up more intentionally more of the time, which I think is what it's all about. For me, the biggest area that I think, again, more of a recurring theme than a single event, was with my kids. I was young. I was a young leader. I had a lot of pressure on me to perform. It was all about, in those days, back when I was a pastor, it was all about the church, God, the church, and somewhere family fell into third place or something like that. And I tried. I think I was a good dad, but there's moments where I was just mentally and emotionally checked out. I just wasn't. I was there physically with them, but I was somewhere else. And I saw the pain that caused my kids. And if there's a place where I hear the voice of shame the most, that's probably one of the places where it's most frequent for me. What strategies have you guys found effective in cultivating being in the moment, right? In an age of we live in the age of disruption. It's called the age of distractions, might be another way to put it. We live in the world of digital zombies, like where devices now steal all of our time and attention. What are the strategies that you guys use on a regular basis to try to cultivate more presence, being more in the moment?
Yeah. Like a practical one that I started 10 years ago, which no one ever did for me. I'm going to talk work, is I turn off all my notifications. And they've been off for 10 years. They're off my phone. They're off my computer. So, you know, when an email comes in and it pings and everyone's like, and their Slack goes off and everything goes off, everything is silenced for me. I have badges with numbers that I can go look at. But the difference with that is that it's my choice when I open my email. It's my choice when I open my Slack to see who's messaging me. Because what happens, you know, talk about multitasking, but let's say I'm working on a report and someone I'm over here already and I'm already replying to that email and I've completely lost track and focus of where I am. So, and it seems like everyone's like, oh yeah, I do that. I'm like, but actually, like, I'm on snooze for everything. And a lot of people are nervous. Well, what if I miss something and it's really urgent? I'm like, there's nothing that's urgent.
Right. Unless you work in an emergency department or the fire department.
It's all relative, right? But that has served me so well. And it actually helps reduce my anxiety because I'm not getting pinged.
Yeah, I love that.
I think that's amazing. I've learned to piggyback on that, to not become obsessed when my notifications, like at Facebook, for instance, like if I have 10 it's fine. Like I don't need to check them right away to clear them all. It's fine. I'll get to it when I get to it. I hate starting the day reactive. And because of the type of work I'm in where I'm client facing, I am on all day, right? When you're client facing, nobody gives a shit about what's going on. That you're like, I'm there to serve them. And so at the end of the day, or even at the beginning of the day, knowing that I'm on all the time, at the end of that, having silence for me is key because I don't want to people anymore.
Yeah.
I need that silence in the morning. So when I do wake up in the morning, even if I'm sitting up having my tea, a lot of times I'm not on my phone yet because I don't want to see what's on Facebook. I don't want to see what's going on. Like, yes, I think there's a balance of being informed, but I don't want to always be tied to checking, looking, and responding.
Right. Yeah. I have a love-hate relationship with devices and social media.
Yeah.
For that very reason. Love it in terms of it's necessary for business and there is some enjoyment you get out of it. But it can become so problematic and so all-consuming that you're constantly checking your phone for, the FOMO you described. Right? Maybe I missed something and I don't want to miss anything. And how many of us have like checked our email on our phone and then checked it again? Like, just in case in the last split second something else came in, right?
Yeah.
One tool I've been using recently, I started experimenting with an app called Freedom. I'll put the link in the show notes, but it literally, you can program and schedule times where it just shuts it all off. So you still have internet access. If you still need to access your email, whatever, you get to control which apps, which websites it turns on and off. And the special sauce is you can put a setting in there that once the schedule starts, you can't disable it. And so I've been doing that in the morning so that when I get up in the mornings, if I'm having my cup of coffee, rather than start needlessly going through my phone and starting my day in that state, that I start paying more closer attention. I want to start introducing. I just did it wrong the other night and it turned off everything. We couldn't even access Netflix. We wanted to watch a movie and we couldn't even watch Netflix because I was like, no. So I've reset it now. I need to re-enable it. But even in the evenings after like 9 p.m., I don't need it anymore. Even like how many of you have watched a movie? You're sitting there watching a movie, you're watching a game, and you're also scrolling your phone at the same time. I'm like, for the love of God, can we not focus on one thing and just choose an activity and focus wholeheartedly?
And the answer to that is yes, we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
We may not think we can. And, to a couple of thoughts that I have around too, and I love that the Freedom app, it's something you mentioned before, and I want to look into it. I know you always, your phone's almost always on Do Not Disturb. One of the things I do to safeguard, what if there's an emergency is certain people, my kids, right? They're in my favorites and they can get around that.
They can get in.
They get in regardless, right? Yeah. But I know one of the practices that I've gotten into about being in the moment, and again, it goes back to those conversations piece. I have practiced and gotten, I think, pretty good at focusing in on whomever is speaking. So even if Wendy comes over and is talking, we got the game on or whatever, if what she's saying is important, this is the beauty now of streaming services. I can pause the game and still not miss it. I'm not going to miss it. I don't have to just mute it. I can pause it and then just hit play, and I'm right back where I am to be able to do that. But to focus in and have eye contact with someone and to really connect. It was interesting because you were there when we were speaking at this conference, and one of the comments you made to me afterwards, and it really made me feel good that it was noticed because it's deliberate, is she said,
I don't know what this is.
I don't know what I said.
You said,
what did she say?
She said, you're so comfortable with silence. And it was in the moment, if I ask a question or if somebody says something, I'm so comfortable with taking a few seconds to contemplate what I want to say next and not feel like I need to be right away
fill the air.
Yeah.
I think that's a great strategy for people, is to be able to slow down.
Count to 10, whatever.
Don't slow down.
Yep.
Your voice. I was waiting for you to jump in.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
But to slow down with what's going on between the ears when we're in a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the discomfort with silence, you think of the moment, when we talk about the moment, it's all we're guaranteed.
Right.
We'll never get back the time that we've already lived.
No.
And we're not guaranteed anything beyond this one.
No.
And yet most of us are living right at either extreme, and we're missing what's happening right in front of us all the time. If you had the ability, right, out of the box question, the power to turn off all distractions globally, for one day, what do you think people would notice most?
I think people would lose their shit. Right? I know that when you asked, when I contemplated that question, I was like, for one day, people would lose their shit. They would not know what, they would be so uncomfortable. People would be panicking. It would take a few days. It's no different. You ever hear people, they talk about, I go on a vacation and I need the first 3 days, I just need to decompress.
Yeah. That used to be me, not anymore.
That's not me, right?
I'm decompressing 2 days before.
Exactly, right. But that's the reality for a lot of people. So when I think of turning everything off for one day, it's like they're not even decompressed at that point because they've never learned how. At that point, the silence would terrify people. It would take, I think, a few days. But I do think after a few days, most people would be like, "Oh my God, this is wonderful."
Well, and I think it would force people to connect because, especially during COVID, and I see it, even working with those in a younger generation, they really struggle with, as do adults, connecting and creating conversation because they're so tied to their devices. I was, and we missed so much of that. I was driving by a school bus the other day and we were at a stop sign or whatever. And so the bus was on the other side. And I was literally, this just happened a couple of days ago. And every kid had their head down on the phone. And then another bus was right behind, same thing. And I was like, it just made me so sad because I thought when I was a kid and when I was riding the school bus, we were laughing and joking and like talking and whatever. And like, it was just a bizarre thing to see. And I was like, gosh,
they're
like,
all
that's our
laughing and
talking
talking with each other. But
They're
they
right.
just
They're
weren't
talking to
using
the
their
person
voice.
right.
They were talking beside
Yeah,
each
it's
other.
like when my kids text me from upstairs. God
Yeah.
forbid they should actually like come downstairs.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Mom, where are you?
I agree. I think people would connect over time. Like where I see it is like when we go to the cottage and there's no internet and it's forced no internet and you actually unplug because you're forced to. And when it forces your hand at the beginning, you check your phone a million times. You do. It's a habit.
Yeah.
And then eventually you don't. And what it does is it and I remember with my kids when we didn't have internet at the cottage, what a different experience. Like they're on the water, they're laughing. I would see all three of my kids playing together, which like never happens. We would play board games and it's connection. And it's that pure connection that happens, knowing it's temporary. Like I think if everyone's like, oh, it's the end of the world, but knowing it's temporary and it's in a bubble, it's amazing what happens when you
Well, you
take
think about it when
technology.
there's, you made me think of when there's a power outage.
Yeah,
like
very
a
similar.
longer power outage, right? Like,
Very
and
similar.
you know the power's going to be out for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're lighting some candles, you're pulling out a board game.
Totally.
Right.
And
Completely different
yeah.
experience. Sam and I, my 18-year-old son, we checked in with each other recently. Just, hey, how's it going? There have been some changes about where he's living. He had been living half-time with my ex and me. Now he's living full-time with me. So we're about 4 or 5 months into that new arrangement and kind of checking in, how's that going, whatever else. And we had some great conversations about some things that we need to, maybe how we just do this better together, and a nice open conversation with my 18-year-old. It was great. And I love that he had the courage to tell me, he says, one of the favorite things that we do is we'll sit down, have dinner together, and we'll put on a show that we really like. It can be a cartoon that we really like or a movie that we really like. And that's part of how we hang out together. He says, but Dad, oftentimes you either fall asleep because it's often right after work and I'm tired, or you're on your phone. And I said, you're not wrong, right? So now I've made the effort when we sit down, I leave the phone in the kitchen and I sit there and I'm right just to be more present, even though we're not talking that much. We're just sitting
together.
We're doing something together, right? Being here right now. And that's what really deep, meaningful engagement is really all about. Part of it, let's talk about when we talk about being in the moment, there's this state of flow that people refer to where you get involved into something, you're doing something and you lose track of time, right? Time just go, and you feel you're just like in this state of focus and productivity and bliss almost. What's a recent experience where you've lived through that, or you had that? What were you doing and what triggered that deep engagement for you?
Well, I mean, yeah. So,
Steve?
maybe the question should have been, have you
experienced
ever had
before?
that? Well, I think for me, certainly recently would have been the wedding night, but even just the days, the few days leading to the wedding.
It's not necessarily a state of flow. It's where you just got lost in the moment.
No, but
so present.
and I think for those few days, like we joked leading up to the weekend prior to the wedding. We knew all the family was coming in. We were like, okay, you ready? Like it's going to be like, it's going to be a whirlwind for the next few days. And that's what I anticipated it to be. And it was the opposite. It was like, in many ways, time slowed down and there was just so many wonderful moments. Some of them captured, some of them not captured. Whether that was, again, I've shared on last couple episodes, I've talked a bit about the conversation I had with my girls. The night after that, a bunch of everybody sitting around, the music's playing on the Google Home, and all of a sudden we're playing Name That Tune, and everybody's engaged in that moment, but no one's on their phone at that point. Everybody's just having fun, so much laughter and everything like that. And then the wedding night itself, like I was, it's funny. We just watched again, of course, everybody out. It's funny to see because we are in the moment and everyone who is at the wedding has got their phones up, taking pictures and recording and all this stuff, right? Which we so appreciate. But watching that over again, and I remember that night just sitting there at one point, sitting at the table as everybody was engaged, literally just watching you guys, my friends, my family, just engaging with each other, the laughter and the rich conversations, and just taking in the moment. Nothing else was in my mind but that.
I love that. I love that. One of my favorite memes that have been circulating the internet now for several years is a picture of this older lady. She's standing there in a crowd, and you're like, the pictures of the crowd facing you, and obviously the crowd is watching something unfold, and everybody's got their camera out like this, and she's standing there leaning on the railing, just taking it all in. And I'm going, who's better off in that moment? Who's actually taking that moment in as opposed to just recording it perhaps for your social media feed? I get that lives on and the memories need to be captured, but I think so much time we're missing out on deep, meaningful engagement because we're wanting to record it for some other purpose. And that's, you're not living in the moment when you're doing that.
Well, and that's for us recently, when we were at the cottage, and we were going out on our boards. We paddleboard a lot. And I'm like, are you going to take your phone? You're like, no. And I'm like, I'm not going to take we don't need our phones. And we went out on the water. It's nice to capture photos sometimes because it's so stunning up there. But like, you don't want to be tied to your device. And we got out on our boards and it was this beautiful day and it's a very quiet lake and it's just nature. And we will just stop paddling and we lie down and we'll just float and hold boards so we don't drift apart. And you just listen. And the sounds of water and nature, and that is like, for me, about as lost as you can get I love it.
Yeah, like literally when you just stop everything else that you're doing.
Wild.
The birds seem
louder,
more cheerful.
Yeah.
The sun seems brighter. The sky seems bluer.
Yeah.
The trees seem greener. You can feel the energy.
Wild.
But we're just going a mile a minute all the time, and we're not here. We're over here. We're hardly ever right here. Right.
And I've shared this story before, and I hesitate to share it because we love the fact that people listen to our podcast while walking.
Yes.
But I remember listening to a podcast while walking years ago now. This is probably
It's before this phenomenal podcast got started.
If this podcast was playing, I would most definitely not
still be listening to podcasts when you walk.
But they talked about being in the moment and being fully present. And this person was describing going for a walk and taking in all of the sounds. And at this point, I was walking in behind Parliament Hill at the Ottawa River and just the experience of that, but not hearing any of it. I'm hearing the speaker in my ears and stopping, taking that out. And to this day now, when I walk, now most of the time we're walking together and we're engaged in conversation, which is wonderful. Yeah. But even if I'm just taking Mishka for a walk on my own or just out on my own, I never have something in my ears because I want to hear the birds. I want, even in the city, hearing the sounds of the city and everything. But there's something about that that we lose because we're always so connected to the device.
Yeah. Well, it's almost this, we're addicted to this need to perform. And when if we're walking, we need to be doing something else. If we're working out, we need to have some other activity going on. And I get that there are moments. I know one of my favorite places to watch a podcast or listen to a podcast is when I'm training by myself in my home gym at home. But there are also moments where I just want nothing else
Silence.
going on. We're just so used to having multiple things going on. We have trained our brains to be uncomfortable with it. And so we keep up this hectic internal pace, and then we wonder why we struggle to gear down, right? In daylight. What about for you?
So for me, all the things that I feel like I should be doing, but choose not to do. So procrastination is a big thing for me. And then I feel like, no, it's going to be fine, because then I'm going to get this adrenaline high from, cramming everything in, 32 seconds before something needs to be done or is due. But then I complain that I'm tired and I'm overwhelmed and I'm not organized and all of this stuff. So, I resist sometimes becoming deep in the moment because of my mind always going, which I think is common for people. And your mind is like a muscle, right? And so it's that practiced art of learning to slow down, stop. Not everything has to be done. Good enough sometimes is fine. It doesn't have to be the best all the time, but learning to balance that out.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think it's like, to build off that, for me, it's just the stress of the reality of, and I'm going to go back to it, but single mom of 3 kids, like, it's a work week and I've got to cook dinner, clean dinner, drive them wherever. I've got 8 million things I have to get done. It's almost to the point of like, if I sit here and I talk to one of my kids for 30 minutes, I'm now getting to bed 30 minutes later. Right. I'm now not going to get, I'm going to be going to bed at 12:30 because I still have to flip the laundry and then I got to go pick up this. And so for me, it's like, there's almost this incremental, like, burden almost, that if I spend this time and connect with you, not that I don't want to connect with them, but I'm like, okay, now I do that. And now I don't have any of my time. Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. What about for you? What are some of the resistors?
Well, certainly, I think it would similar the inner critic for sure. When you take that time, it's you're being lazy. Why aren't you doing something else? Why aren't you doing a bunch of things? Like, what's being neglected? All of that you have to then process and deal with, for sure. I think that would be at the top of it for me, would be just that, how do I balance out, hey, this is okay, to just be in the moment, to pause and just take this in. Other shit will happen. And, I got right away thinking about, Stephen Covey talks about in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the urgency, that whole matrix, right? Yeah. And the fact that so many times we're so always on, that, to your point, that suddenly if I actually pause and reflect on something that's not urgent, then all that's just going to stack up. Yeah. And now I'm going to get in real trouble because now it's all behind.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. For me, definitely, it's holding myself to unrealistic expectations. And recently, I developed a matrix of my own around really kind of taking stock of what I've got going on in my life. And it falls into 4 neat categories real fast. Like, there's the obligations, right? There's the obligations category. These are the things that I have to do. I know Get To mindset would shift that language to I get to, but these are the things I literally have to do on a daily basis. My obligations, family, work, that kind of thing. The second category is aspirations. These are the goals, the things that I want to do, the things I want to achieve. Third category is expectations, right, of myself and others. And are they in line with reality? I get into a lot of trouble in that category. And the last one is inspirations. What are the things that I love to do? They set my heart on fire, right? So similar to goals, but slightly different. And what I recognized is that I was moving things from aspirations and inspirations into the obligations category, and putting unrealistic expectations on my time and energy, and then holding myself to performing at a level that's just unrealistic, and stressing myself out. And I'm like, oh, wait a second, I actually only committed to do the following, right? But now I'm overcommitted. What if I just went back to my original commitment? Because that's actually all I've said I would do, but I have the tendency to push myself too hard. That's probably my biggest resistor. Is I create a lot of my.
I love that notion of you shift things into the obligations category, right? And I'll just use living richly as an example. Yeah. All right. We are on this journey of living our best lives. And so there almost becomes this well, there's an obligation that while we're on this podcast, we've got all these people listening. We have to set that example, and that means we can never not be living richly.
Right.
Right. It becomes an obligation. We're obligated to do our rituals, and we're obligated to do all of these things. And I can't help my thought right away to our guest in the last episode, Kelly Flanagan, where he talks about the Dalai Lama, and somebody who followed around this reporter following him around saying, boy, I wish I could just spend a day with you and just soak up your peace. And his response was, well, if you spent a whole day with me, you'd also have to soak up my anger and my right. You'd like just because you're seeing the peace now doesn't mean it's 24/7. Right. Yeah. And I thought, wow, that's right. Like I'm not living richly 24/7.
No.
But so I love how you say that about recognizing aspirations are separate from obligations.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And we often get them confused. But let's talk about obligations for a minute. Yeah. Often in the obligations category, we have those mundane routine tasks that we have to perform. Mm-hmm. What are some strategies that you guys use to practice being more deeply engaged, even with the mundane and the routine things in life?
Yeah, well, I get to, and I use that example of washing the dishes. But for me, that gratitude shift is everything. So there's just stuff we all have to do in our day. But if I can switch that I have to an I get to, it shifts my mood. It shifts my approach. It also, gratitude always brings me back to the present. So I've said this before on the show, but I have to go pick up one of my kids, or I got to drive them somewhere, and I'm going to use the parent one because I'm coming off a long week with my kids. Is that, when I switch it right away to when I get to, I sink into gratitude, and that gets me more present, and that brings me more joy. So no, we joke often on the show, we're like, I get to do the podcast, but I get it.
Wow. Can you do that voice?
Yeah, that voice was great.
I like the voice, and I like the puppet hands.
Because the puppet hands were the best. They were almost like jazz hands. If you could have added jazz hands to that.
Jazz hands and puppet hands.
I get to sit with these people.
So excited.
Yeah, we need to
oh
make
my
it.
God. So if you're listening to the show, go to our YouTube channel and watch this episode. Look at this very moment, 36 minutes in. It'll be hilarious.
But realistically, that I get to, I don't always feel it. You're not supposed to always feel it, to your point, Rob. We're not always living richly 24/7. But if you can say it and it can just give you an inkling, a little bit of gratitude, then it's worth it.
Yeah.
100%.
I use, and I'm pretty consistent with it. I go through seasons, but I call it my daily 3. It can be called like a power list or whatever, but I focus on setting 3 intentions. I try to do them at night, so I'm not thinking about it in the morning, on specific things that I would like to get done the next day. And they're usually very small things, like things that we tend to, I got to do this. And then right when you're giving the example of brushing your teeth, I forgot to sign my daughter up for volleyball, things like that, where I'm intentionally putting them down, because there is satisfaction in crossing stuff off of a list, knowing that you're doing your best to stay organized. And as I get older, I forget shit all the time. But I can rap the lyrics to Informer from 1990, which is like 30 years old. I don't know, but don't remember what I had for breakfast. So. But because I forget stuff all the time, I find this helps a lot. I do tend to use a timer as well sometimes for my tasks, as well as purposely leave my phone in another room, because I know that I will not focus on what I'm supposed to be doing.
I love the daily 3, and it's something that I've been incorporating as well. In fact, we went so far as down the road here, Wendy's going to be under the Real Life. She's going to be launching this kind of challenge thing that she's looking into building out. And so right now we're doing it with the family. And so we're calling it the Fam Jam Challenge. And it's interesting to see most of the kids are embracing it and jumping in on it. And one of them is, there's the daily 3. There's a number of kind of challenges that we're doing every day just to keep ourselves on track. But by doing those, having those defined out, and then being some of these, they are routine. Every one of them is a routine task. And it's often stuff that then gets neglected because it can get dismissed. Yeah. And by having that, making it a challenge with others is something that's been pretty, makes it easier to do it. But the daily 3 is something that I've certainly loved to do. But I go back to, and I'll say this is the magic of, and as much as we were joking there, the get to mindset that you've created. And that mindset is so critical. especially when it comes to routine stuff.
Right.
That's where it makes all the difference in the world, is your attitude. If you can approach it with a heart of gratitude, a mindset of gratitude, any task is easier to do when you shift.
The third dimension about mastering the now, or living in the now, at least mastering the moment, is making those intentional choices, like aligning your life around your goals, your values, your life vision. This is in direct contrast to, we talk about coasting and drifting through life, which is, I think, what a lot of people do. How do you guys align your daily choices, or your ongoing choices, align your life in general with your values and the kind of life that you envision?
Yeah, it's a work in progress for me. I think it's a daily, I'm not going to say daily because that's not accurate. So I'm not going to use that term. But I often throughout the week will check in if what I'm doing, does it align with my values? That's a big one for me to know, but also where I want to go. So I think we have talked about this too before on the show, but intrinsically, when something's off. So you feel it, you might not recognize it, but you don't feel good if you're doing something in your day that is maybe not aligned with who you are or what you believe or where you want to go. I'm not talking about like, you don't feel like taking the garbage out. We all have to take the garbage out. That's not really what I'm talking about.
We get to take the garbage
out. Now I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I didn't mean to throw you off.
You completely.
So you're saying we all have to take the garbage out?
I got that part.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We'll have to play it back and.
That I'm getting better at things.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
Well, I love
that.
So our values, we talk about it so often on the show. Our values are the compass.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not about aligning what we're doing with our values. It's, do the values align with what we're doing, in the sense that is the compass guiding us in the right direction to do that. And I'll go back to, shameless plug, 15-day Life Vision Challenge. The part about the challenge, why I love the challenge so much. And again, for those who haven't done it, it's on our website. It's free. Make sure you check it out. It's the manifesto that you end with. Right? It's here is now my living document that can now set the tone for all the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the ability to not just say yes to things, but what that, having clear life vision focus, having that clear allows you to say no to so many things.
Love that.
And that's why we so believe in the challenge and why we so encourage people to do it, because this is exactly what it brings you to.
Yeah, I love how you put it that way. And I loved how you said, like, we can feel when we're out of alignment or when it doesn't feel right. But I think a lot of folks, until you get clear on who you are, what you stand for, what you're doing doesn't quite feel right, but you can't pinpoint it. You can't define it. You've just got this disease or this unease in your life, but you can't define why. Once you know why, or you know what you're about, or you've done some of that work, you can more quickly identify, where am I out of alignment and how do I intentionally bring myself back on course.
Yes.
No, I think that's great. The only other thing I would add is for me, identifying if it's whatever I'm doing, if it's a busy task or a productive task.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's a very clear difference on, am I being busy? Am I being productive?
Yeah.
And we could be busy, and Rob and I laugh all the time about, because we're both procrastinators and we'll be doing everything else but whatever our goal was for the day, right? Like, the grass needs cutting, or, I'm going to reorganize my pantry because suddenly I've decided that's an urgent thing to do.
Yeah.
But that's not a productive thing for me to do at that time, right? And to your point, Rob, on values, does it align with my values and keeping myself in check in survival mode or thrival mode, and where that balance lies?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll shift gears to the fourth dimension just because of time. We could spend a lot of time talking about all of this. The last part of this is about fostering deep connections. I think, again, a lot of our conversations, a lot of our connections can be very superficial. And I think it's because of the way that our culture has evolved, our obsession with devices. Again, again, you talk about watching kids on a bus and every single one of them's got their head down. Like our whole culture now, our whole society is going to end up with neck problems and heart problems because their head is down, looking at their feet all the time, looking at their device, right? And it's a problem. It's about the difference between being partially present to deeply connected. And again, we're not talking about perfection on this front, but what if we could be more connected? What are the things that you guys practice that help you foster more genuine, deep connections with yourself, with others, and your environment?
I don't want to call it a practice. It's like, just start, but I say it all the time, but be aware, just start getting present. Like that's always what my thing is be aware when you're not present. And I think sometimes it's more sort of, you're more aware of it than you want to think that you are. Like you're fully aware if you're busy in the kitchen and you're not really engaging with your kids. I'm using my example. I know I'm busy doing busy work. I know I'm cleaning up and I'm thinking 5 steps ahead, and I'm very aware that I'm not present with my kids. And I think just that step alone is hard for so many people. Yeah. So it's really about just starting that practice of being aware of when you're not present. Don't criticize it. Don't judge it. Observe it. Just start to get familiar with those moments when you're not fully present. Right. And from there, over time, I think you can build more practices to help you get more present.
Yeah. And I think it's around that progress, not perfection. Yeah. So maybe it's,
great way to put it.
Like setting that intention on, for whatever, 5 minutes today or whatever part of your day I'm going to focus on, being present. Yeah. Same, when I think about mine, it would be taking a true, genuine interest in people, and really paying attention, listening and asking questions, whether it's, friends, family, my staff, people that I'm working with, really learning about them. Now, I naturally love connecting and learning about people anyways, but I'm human like anybody else. My kids will be sharing something, or somebody in my life will be sharing, and my mind is thinking about either how I'm going to respond or whatever else is going on. Making people feel seen and heard, but also being able to be open about sharing my struggles as well. Like the other day I went to go get a tea at Tim Hortons, and I saw this lady coming out with 4 bags of Lone Star chips and salsa. And I was like, I want you in my life, and I don't want to eat my salad tonight. I want to eat my Lone Star chips tonight, because working in the fitness space, people always think that you're on and, you've got it all figured out. I don't have anything figured out. Well, I have some things figured out, but just being really vulnerable and honest and open with people around that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think we're using different language, and we're saying the same thing around this. And I would use the language of active listening, right? So actively listening to yourself and the thoughts that are going through your mind, and how are you responding, paying attention, right? And then just practice that gift. And, I when I use that exercise with when I'm speaking at events, I'll give them homework, and their homework is to take some time each day, just 5 minutes where you're actively listening with someone, and just see how much that starts to impact the relationships around you. Yeah. It's life-changing to be able to do that. No matter what, it could be the most superficial conversation you're having, but to just engage with that person, to really be present and just listening and hearing what that person is saying, does transform something within us.
For me, definitely curiosity, nurturing curiosity for people, for what's going on inside my own, under the hood for me. I think the greater the curiosity, the deeper the connection, because you remain interested. There's something else for you to discover, something else for you to learn. And a very practical thing that I do, even just in my work with my clients, COVID fucked us over in so many ways. And one of the ways, yes, we all got online, and I think it fast forwarded technology by probably 10 or 15 years. But how many conversations are you on a call and the other person doesn't even have their video on? Right? And if they do, and that to me is weird, because it'd be like me trying to have a conversation with you, but I've got my back to you. Like we're not looking at each other, can't see each other. That's not fostering deep connection. And I get there's probably people at work you don't want to foster deep connection with, but the more we do that, the more we train ourselves to be out of the moment, disconnected from the moment. So even if you see it not about fostering deep connection with that person, but training your brain to be here right now, turn the camera on. The other thing I do is I turn my self view off. Because in this conversation right now, I'm seeing you, I'm seeing you, I'm seeing you. I'm not seeing my face above yours and constantly being distracted by what I look like. And is the lighting okay? And do I have a booger out of my nose? Or right? In normal conversation, we don't do that. I do have a booger. If you're on Spotify, you're really glad you're not watching right now. Because apparently I have a booger out my nose. But we with the self view, again, it creates this.
It's not healthy.
It's not a normal dynamic. We are not present to what's going on here. Not only are we listening perhaps for the next opportunity to speak, our focus is over here. It's fostering anything but deep connection, right? Guys, we're going to wrap up very shortly here. One last question before a short summary, and then I'm going to hand back over to Rob to close up the show. If you could create a ritual that everyone in the world would follow to enhance connection, what would it involve and why?
For me, do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
You can arm wrestle.
We could. I would never arm wrestle with Wendy. I would lose so fast.
I wouldn't arm wrestle with Wendy.
I've heard she can do better arm curls than you.
Yeah, no, it's tricep push-ups.
Tricep push-ups, okay.
But arm curls as well.
Oh wow. Gauntlet dropped.
I think for me, it would be, I would encourage people to say something kind to a stranger. I think there's something very powerful about what you see in someone else's eyes when you walk up to them and you just do something nice, say something nice. You know, the whole philosophy, like when you're in the Tim Hortons line and someone in front of you's bought your coffee for you, right? It just do that kind. If you can just find that and to bring joy to someone else's life is extremely powerful. And what that brings to you by passing on the kindness, I would love to see that.
I think the ritual I would create is to ensure that everyone has at least one friend in their life, because there's a lot of people who are lonely who don't have friends, especially for kids that go to school, and you know, just making sure that everybody has at least one friend in their life that they trust.
Growing problem with adults too. It's not just among kids.
Just among kids.
So true.
To see the worth in every person, and a quick story around this that I've never forgotten. It impacted me so greatly. She doesn't even realize how much it impacted me. But friends of mine, John and Chantel, and we were in Montreal 15 years ago, and we're about to go into a pretty nice restaurant to have a nice meal. And outside the restaurant, there's this homeless guy sitting there, just kind of, and I walked by, didn't even exist to me. I didn't even notice him. John, we walked by, didn't even notice him. Chantel stops and gets down at his level and just says hi, has a quick little conversation with him. Are you hungry? Do you need anything? And just that simple. And then got up and came into the restaurant. Medicine. We had already gone in the restaurant. Like I noticed it and then I went in the restaurant. But it impacted me in that sense of recognizing that was a human being that didn't exist to me. Right. And just that motion of if that's a gift, if we can have, is that every person has some level of value, regardless of their status, regardless of anything else.
Yeah.
Wow.
My ritual would be creating a daily device and social media free zone, so people could stop this obsessive comparison, comparing themselves with others and feeling shitty as a result, and actually start to connect with themselves, the people around them, and what really matters. I think I would love that. We just turn it off. Just switch every day. And we just turn it off globally for the whole world.
Yeah.
Thank you for participating in this conversation,
been great,
guys. I just think a huge part of living richly. We need to reset our relationship with our past. We need to get clear on the kind of life we want to live, but none of that is going to have the kind of traction if we can't learn to live more in the now, mastering the moment.
So good. And we deeply appreciate each and every one of you that tune in each week, listening in. We would love for you to take some time just to give us some comments, share your thoughts about what are some of the things you do to make sure that you are deeply connected. Want to encourage you to like this, share this episode out with some other people, but definitely go to our website, livingrichlly.me. We mentioned the 15-day challenge. It's there. It's available for each one of you. Want to encourage you to just take some time to listen, to do the exercise. It's free, as we've already mentioned, and really want to encourage you to do that. Thank you so much for tuning in, and get out there and live your best life.